You saw the graphics that I showed. A lot of that was done by Copilot. I didn't know how to use that capability. I just went to Copilot and PowerPoint and said, okay, how do I add animations into these things? So
there's obviously a hesitancy. There's obviously a kind of evaluation period. So what do you see as the next kind of steps happening in that kind of adoption of AI across the continent?
Employees are looking for something very different from leaders, and CIOs will tell you that that is a top priority, right, for their organizations, for their CEOs.
Hello and welcome to ITWeb TV on the road. Today I'm coming to you from the Sandton Convention Center. We're at the Microsoft AI A New Era event. There's about 1,000 delegates here today, mostly from the developer community. We are now going to speak to Mark Chaban, who's the CTO for Central and Eastern Europe, Middle East and Africa for Microsoft, and Lillian Barnard, who is the president for Microsoft Africa. So Mark, let's start with Intelligent Cloud. I saw from the latest set of results that you had Microsoft had a 19% cloud growth in revenue. So from reading through the releases, AI is obviously driving a lot greater cloud adoption. Is it the growth engine that cloud needed? Or, I mean, cloud's obviously been selling or been doing successfully recently, but is AI really kind of pushing cloud adoption even further?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I would say, maybe I'll quote Lillian here because she said something this morning that would really resonates well. It's not an autopilot, it's really a co-pilot. And I think the way we're democratizing AI and making sure that AI is available and easily accessible, whether you're a developer, somebody using LinkedIn, somebody using Bing Chat, somebody using, Outlook capability, we wanted to make it easy. So being able to democratize AI and make it easily accessible, leveraging the most mature, capable large language model that exists today, being OpenAI, absolutely, it's made this not only accessible but also very easy to use. I think you can correlate to this when you think about the ChatGPT. The first time you use ChatGPT, it's like there's a wow moment, right? And I think that wow factor is something we get from our developers. You saw the quote I shared on stage from Andre Karpathy. It's writing 80% of the code with 80% accuracy. I mean, that's stunning if you think about the productivity there for developers. So AI is making it easy. AI is making it accessible. And having one of the best large language models in the world at our fingerprints is also very unique and special at this moment in time.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that quote, and it was you said 46% of new code is written by AI. I mean, that's quite impressive by itself. Yeah. So I know that you've got Copilot on Microsoft 365 is coming out this week. What does that mean for general users? What does it mean for enterprises? What do you see them how do you see them adopting it?
I think first the biggest piece of excitement is the largest canvas that we have worldwide, which is Windows. Windows 11 this week, actually, the Copilot will be generally available. We've had it in preview. Some customers have had access to it in beta. And I think we've learned a lot. Listening to their feedback, continuing to improve the bug fixes and so on. So every Windows 11 user will be able now to have access to a Copilot-like experience on their device. And again, that means it's going to become easier to me to have accessibility features that are activated and turned on because I can just chat with it using conversational AI. Now, if you take that to M365 and how do we now, expand that to your entire experience when I'm using email, when I'm using Word, or I'm using Teams, I think that's an amazing opportunity because all of a sudden the power of AI is going to make me a lot more productive, right? I look forward to every meeting that we have internally in the company today to the last 10 minutes when Teams AI says, here's a summary of everything that's basically happened. And I find myself, because I've been on this thing for months, I find myself missing a lot of meetings, whether I'm traveling or I just can't make the meeting. I go back to the Teams and I say, what did I miss? And it tells me. Who took the decisions? And it tells me. What actions, who was assigned which actions, and I'm chatting with it, and it's telling me as a summary of that meeting. Now, what does this mean for customers? It means it's secure, it's in their own tenant, it's speaking their language, it's speaking their own kind of privacy capabilities. All of that is being extended to that Teams capability. But Teams is just one simple example. I can have it write my emails in Outlook and extend that to, even evolving and making me a better PowerPoint user. You saw the graphics that I showed. A lot of that was done by Copilot. I didn't know how to use that capability. I just went to Copilot and PowerPoint and said, okay, how do I add animations into these things? So I found myself actually a more productive user, but a happier user at the end of the day.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a very open question, and
sure.
I'm conscious that we have some time constraints, but what do you think the future of AI is beyond where we are kind of today? I mean, obviously you're rolling out Copilot, you're rolling out that kind of assistant to help users with these kind of everyday tasks. But say 5 years, 10 years down the line, where do you think we are? Where are we going with it?
I'd say we need to continue to get mature around the responsible AI. I think that's probably the most urgent thing. And I really meant it when I said it. I've been for at least 11 this last internally, just in my role, being given this additional assignment, reviewing all of the sensitive use cases that come to us. Sensitive use cases meaning is any customer in our region of 108 countries that wants to actually do a project that involves AI, we are reviewing those things to say, okay, is it fair? Is it inclusive? Is it transparent? Is it safe? Right? And a lot of that over the years used to be a very manual process. I would say now that we've got capabilities in Azure in the form of responsible AI, it's just the start. Mm-hmm. And I think we're on early days of making sure that we can continue based on customer feedback to improve that dashboard, to make sure that customers can leverage it based on their own responsible AI ethics and metrics that they have internally. The 6 that I shared on stage are just ours. I've seen many customers having 16, right? And so on. So I think that's early days for that. The second one for me, when I think about AI, is what can we really do for good? And we launched this program many years ago, but there's the excitement for AI for humanitarian efforts, AI for healthcare, AI for accessibility. It's unbelievably blown up now. In fact, initially the program, when it was announced, it was about $1 billion in terms of funding that we would do for all the things around AI for good. When I look at the startups that are coming and actually getting funding, and you can see them on the AI for Good website, I think that space is just going to blow up because it's very intentional on accessibility. It's very intentional on the climate. It's very intentional on humanitarian efforts. So super exciting where that space will continue to grow. Third, I would say when thinking about, how will this continue to evolve, it'll be less about, training a large language model and trying to prove out the next large language model, but really around how do I continue to infuse the AI capability to actually help humanity. Okay. Really, it's not about GDP kind of just, hey, you know what, it's net new wealth that's being created, but in a way is how am I really helping humanity to improve, life for you and me and everybody on an everyday basis.
Okay. So I've got 2 follow-ups. One would be, obviously cloud and AI are kind of very strongly linked. What in terms of where do you see it going in the future in terms of edge? Is it always going to be a cloud-centric kind of solution, or will there be more growth of AI at the edge?
Look, I think the best example of the edge is Windows 11, right? So if you think about a lot of these edge devices, a lot of that compute will actually continue to take place in the edge. So no, I don't see it happening in a centralized way where everything runs in the cloud. That's not the case. Most of that will actually happen at the edge, and we're doing a lot of work to make sure that it's easily doable at the edge, even in an offline experience.
Okay. And then I want to go back to the regulation point. There's a report come out this week that the G7's kind of looking to introduce some regulation around code of conduct for companies. So I think that's all very good that, obviously Microsoft's had the responsible computing kind of initiatives for many years. But how do you align with the cloud as a kind of multi-vendor world? How do you align and make sure that it's not just like the Microsoft that's playing the responsible party? How do you get all the other companies and countries on board to kind of align to a common goal?
Yeah, I think responsibility is a big word. We didn't just start working on responsible AI. I think if I remember, there was a Wired magazine article with the interview with Satya, our CEO, back in I think 2016 or 2017. You'll have to check. I don't remember the dates. It was at that point where we just basically said as a company, we have a bigger responsibility on everything that we do with AI, especially if you saw the slide that I had around the 7 years of innovations, just the last 7 years of innovations in terms of AI breakthroughs. So for us during the 7 years, we decided to say from 2016 and onwards, we're gonna be really loud and bold about everything we do in responsible AI. The reason why I'm taking you back to so many years is because it continues to be a journey. Mm-hmm. We're learning a lot from customers. We're learning around how do we build it. We're learning around What is a sensitive use case? We're learning a lot around fairness and so on. So I think for Microsoft, we've been very loud and I would say transparent about all of our efforts here. And it continues to be a journey that will continue to evolve. The second piece is the cloud piece for us. If you look at a lot of the work that we're doing, whether it's on data or on security or on privacy or a lot of the capability, we support multi-cloud. We support it to ensure that customers can extend that capability and be able to manage and secure those experiences regardless of where they sit. So if we feel good about it, but it's definitely a journey, and we continue, I feel like, with our leader being Brad Smith and Satya, continue to be very transparent about our learnings and how much we continue to accelerate in this journey.
Okay. OpenAI was kind of a big part of, I think, where it's kind of reached people's attention, particularly ChatGPT. There's obviously DALL-E before that. What's the kind of journey? What's the kind of roadmap for future OpenAI integration into Microsoft solutions?
Well, I think again, going back to 2019, early days of GPT, that strong partnership that we started with OpenAI allowed us to first be able to partner with them very closely to figure out how do we take this to the masses, right? And things I talked about a little bit earlier today, that deep partnership with them and knowing what we're going to build for in the future, almost 3-4 years later, allowed us to really build those AI supercomputers, right? So first, that not only did we were able to build it, but we said it was all around how do we actually take it at scale so everyone can have access to it. So it's interesting now, you can talk to anybody and they'll tell you about some kind of a GPU and even some GPU model numbers. The only person that used to talk to me about GPUs was my son because he wanted a GPU in his gaming machine. But outside of that, no one knew anything about GPUs. So I would say, I feel like we built an AI supercomputer from the ground up, and we are the first. It's really the 5th largest AI supercomputer. And we've done that with deep understanding of what we're solving for and a look to the future from a sustainability efforts, from a scalability efforts, and from a democratization so everyone can have access to this technology. So I think where we are today is a great start, but it just still early days for, the potential here. Okay. Like you saw in this McKinsey, study that I shared, today the market's about 500 billion, a little bit over 500 billion. It's going to go to 2.5 trillion in 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
It's an amazing opportunity.
So there's a report that I read recently about, the AI is set to use the same amount of energy as the Netherlands by 2027. So obviously energy consumption, I know Microsoft's kind of very focused on kind of carbon negativity or carbon neutral kind of going forward. How do you solve that problem? How do we, obviously the more we use AI, the more computing power it's going to need, the more energy it consumes. So how do we go about kind of solving that?
Yeah. First of all, from a carbon neutral, I think we've been carbon neutral since 2012, which is it's not a milestone by any means. Being carbon negative and even going back to our founding from 1975 and being able to remove all of those emissions that Microsoft, from the Microsoft founding is something that makes me proud. Being able to go back and remove a lot of that capability, a lot of those carbons. But more importantly, it's not about talking about it. It's the fact that we already have a lot of these deployments. So today, if you go online very quickly and you look at our Sweden data center, you'll see how we harness rainwater. Yeah. You'll see how we are actually already carbon negative. You'll see how even the backup diesels, we're requiring those to be at least 50% coming from carbon-free kind of materials. So a lot of those efforts are already in place, and you'll see them in Finland, you'll see them in Sweden, you'll see them in our Quincy, Washington data centers. The free air cooling that we're using. In fact, Sweden uses all free air cooling. So a lot of that capability is actually in deployment. It's already happening today. I think the real question is those machines that I talked about, you said energy consuming GPUs. The non-conductive cooling is an early view around a lot of that work. So being able to put a DC in the bottom of the ocean, or being able to actually submerge and completely put a motherboard and remove heat sinks and fans from the supply chain process, that's allowing us actually to reduce that PUE footprint. So some incredible work happening from Microsoft research in this space, very encouraging about our ability to continue to reduce that PUE footprint. And again, this has been a journey. I think I was talking about PUE footprint in the company probably over 10 years ago, because we've been very focused around making sure that not only are we talking about sustainability and a 2030 goal, but this is something that we do every single day, and Microsoft research has been a big part of that.
Okay. One thing that you mentioned was around the AI supercomputer being built in Ireland. Now, the way that we've seen data centers come to South Africa or across the world, then come to South Africa, is an AI supercomputer going to be kind of regionalized in that sense in future? And if so, at what point do you think we'll get one in Africa?
I would say, let me go back a bit,
okay.
and say in January of this year, when we launched OpenAI as a service on Azure, we launched it at our data centers worldwide with South Africa. How do you then basically ensure that we're meeting kind of the tech hardware capability with the service capability that we're offering? And we have many, many regions worldwide. Not all of them have all the full GPU capability. South Africa does.
Okay.
And that for me, why I wanted to call that on stage, because thanks to Lillian and a lot of her efforts, we know that the demand of customers here, and we're trying to actually make sure that we are responsive to that demand. So we brought the GPUs, they're available in this country, and customers have the ability not only now for them to run the large language model, whether it's the hundreds of billions of parameters, whether it's OpenAI or ours, the Megaturian model, or the trillion parameter models, they have the ability to run those in South Africa leveraging our GPUs. Okay. The difference I would say is when you think about if you're in the early days of OpenAI, and we've been very open about this. Our CTO, Kevin Scott, has done a lot of public podcasts about this. You can see them. And he basically talked about the work that we started with OpenAI in 2019. If you're going to go and do this at inception, you have this unique opportunity in time to go and do it right. You build the switches in a certain way. You build the InfiniBand networking in a certain way. You build the GPU capability in a certain way, because you know what you're building for in terms of being able to scale this for billions and trillions of parameters for a large language model that will be trained and inferenced. And that's what we set out to do. And I think that's why you see the 7 months I showed have been a very busy time for us in terms of being able to democratize and bring this capability to anyone that wants it.
Okay. Then Lillian, maybe if we can move to the African focus. Okay, so looking at the African focus, we've obviously had the data centers built out in South Africa. Microsoft was the first to the continent, not just the country, but the first to the continent. We've seen other players follow. What's the next step for Microsoft in terms of putting hyperscale out into the rest of the continent? How do you get those kind of data centers looking at kind of local data sovereignty regulations increasing now? How do we kind of solve those issues going forward for, I don't know, clients in Zambia or in Kenya or in other kind of key markets?
Great question. Thank you, Adrian. So when we actually look at how we're going to accelerate digital innovation at scale, you need digital infrastructure. And I'm partnering with Mark on it. What's fantastic about bringing the continent together as one team is that we're using some of the best practices of things that we've done in South Africa, using some of those models to make sure that we can be a little bit more faster in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Egypt, in Morocco. These are all our key countries. Now, we're working on various projects. To be clear, I cannot make any commitments, but I can tell you it's a key priority for me. In fact, I'm just back from Egypt. I've just been to Nigeria, to Lagos, and super interesting conversations with customers there. They are ready. They are ready to take their innovation to the next level. We're aware of it, and we will continue to prioritize, digital infrastructure, not just in South Africa, but even beyond.
Okay, I mean, I'm conscious of the fact that you're kind of using some partners to kind of, or some partners are actually putting their own kind of Azure stack in country to kind of help fast track that. Okay. So then ITWeb and Brainstorm's recently run a survey of CIOs in the country. And we've seen, I think 16% said that they've adopted generative AI kind of solutions. 60% were talking about it's on their kind of radar, they're evaluating it. How do you think, I mean, does that stack up with what you're seeing? And how do you think we kind of speed up that adoption? Is it just going to happen naturally? There's obviously a hesitancy, there's obviously a kind of evaluation period. So what do you see as the next kind of steps happening in that kind of adoption of AI across the continent?
I think what we have to focus on, and I mean, if you look at the stats, right, you get varying degrees of, they will tell you sub-Saharan Africa, it is low in terms of just looking at the overall AI adoption. But if you look at certain studies, it will show you that when companies think about overall just strategy, embedding that in the core of their business, it is actually quite high. But for me, in terms of getting more people to buy in and to understand the importance of it, you have to explain the benefits of it. What does it mean for you? What does it mean for your organization? What can you do differently, right? And this is the work that we are doing with, CXOs, just beyond the CIO, And if you think about, all the, and the team's going to talk about, co-pilots today. If you think about productivity, and Mark spoke about that, what are, the benefits that you can get out of it from your people, giving them the ability to do more meaningful work. You look at your developers, how they can use GitHub Copilot to make sure that they don't have to do all, the coding from scratch. You're looking about it. Viva Copilot is about, improving productivity, because if you go back to what they really value, which is their core KPIs, which is how do we create new services? If you look, for example, in banking, the whole key is around hyper-personalization.
Sure.
How do they do that? You look at retail. How do you create better customer experience? How do you bring up recommendations? That is a language we're going to have to speak to these CXOs about, beyond the technology. And the moment you start doing that, you can see the interest. You can see that you're experimenting with very different projects. The ones that I mentioned, for example, Zebra GPT from Investec, looking at improving employee productivity, how that is just kind of helping the team spearhead and accelerate. And for me, when you have that, then I believe, firstly, you have the right conversation, but also you will be able to accelerate the interest.
Okay. 51% of our kind of CIOs surveyed said that employee personal productivity, to your point, was their kind of top use case at the moment. Then it was 43 onto content generation, 43%, and knowledge management, 36%. Personalized marketing and customer experience, which is what I would have thought it would be kind of one of the top use cases. Only 21% of CIOs said that was kind of on their, either on their radar or one of their top kind of use cases. So I was kind of surprised that it was that low. I don't know if you've got a response to that.
I think I want to go back to employee productivity now, and we have to go back to the pandemic, because we thought about productivity very different pre-pandemic, right? We did not know that if we give people the right tools, the tech, that you could get something very different out of it. You could increase productivity. And that is wherein lies the opportunity, because if you think about our work from home policies, companies by and large are still grappling with it. How do you get teams to collaborate, right, effectively at an elevated level, even though they're sitting remotely? So employees are starting to look at work very differently. That has to be a core focus, right? Because employees are looking for something very different from leaders, and CIOs will tell you that that is a top priority, right, for their organizations, for their CEOs. And I think when it comes to the piece around personalization and all of that, it depends on the industry you're in. And for example, if I look at our bankings, that becomes a very present opportunity. They're looking at that. And even for us sitting here, even though, we are consumers, we're customers, right? You also know that there's a next level of service that you do expect. And I think that you will see various companies actually taking advantage of what they can do in providing you with a very individualized service based on, the 360 view that they have of you as a customer.
Sure. Okay. So to wrap up and kind of give you my last question, you mentioned today, Lillian, that you've got skills centers in Lagos, Nairobi, and Cairo. I think that was right. Yes. Is there any kind of local news around that? Are we expecting skills centers in more countries? When would we expect one in South Africa?
So I can't make an announcement about South Africa, but I can tell you that that is a focus for us. And it goes back to, just the youth that we have on the continent, the opportunity for us to create digital acceleration. We've got local data centers, and I think there's an opportunity for us to do something different here. I think it's fantastic that we already have the 3 on the continent. It speaks directly of Microsoft's investment and just how serious Microsoft is actually taking the continent. But I cannot make any commitments yet, but I can tell you that is a key focus for me.
Okay. So then in terms of skills and the YES program that you announced today, can you just give us a little brief overview of what that was?
Oh, it's a fantastic program. We're excited because what we want to make sure is that we empower young people with future-ready skills. We've been on this journey, doing basic to technical skills, but AI is definitely the focus for us. What I love about the YES program is that we're focusing not, on 30,000, we're focusing on 300,000. That is talking about literally impact, because we are focusing on large, scale skilling projects. And there are 3 types of modules. You can, start with what they call the AI novice, where you can get some rudimentary, fundamental info on just, AI, what it is and what you could do with it. Then you have the beginners that tells you a little bit more about Azure OpenAI, and that you go to the experts in terms of what it could do for you in business, what it could do for you as an individual. And that actually as well leads you to certification. So we really want to give people several pathways. And what you want to do is that you really want to, with their appetite for what this is, they should not necessarily, exclude themselves from it, because AI can change the life of everyone. It is about the individual, the industry, the organization.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lillian. This has been ITWeb TV.